Well, thank you for joining us on Euronews this evening. Well, breaking news of the fire that has been engulfing Notre-Dame Cathedral in Paris. A fire that began raging at 7 p.m. local time. That's about 5 hours ago. Firefighters have been struggling to get that blaze under control. But just a few moments ago, we heard from the French President Emmanuel Macron, who said that the worst had been avoided, but nonetheless, a great deal of damage there to this iconic monument in Paris that is loved around the world. Well, throughout the evening, I've been joined by my co-presenter, Janat Jalil, who's been following all of tonight's events. Janat, it's been an evening of just high drama and emotion, hasn't it?
It really has, Isabel. So many people have been reacting to this, speaking of their sorrow, their shock, their horror, riveted as they've watched those flames spread across the roof of Notre-Dame. And earlier in the evening, it looked like the whole building was going to either be gutted or collapse. But there is some hope now at the end of the night. It seems that the structure has been saved, as have the two towers. Although the spire, which was constructed in the 19th century, made of oak, has collapsed and much of the roof has been destroyed. We now know that Notre-Dame can be rebuilt. And we heard from President Macron a few moments ago, as you were saying, and he talked about the significance of Notre-Dame, how it was part of France's history, part of its literature, part of France's imagination, how people had lived their lives through Notre-Dame, how Notre-Dame had been there throughout French history. It had survived wars, it had survived the plague, epidemics. It had been the epicenter of French people's lives. And to see it burn was like seeing part of ourselves burn. That's what the French president said. And he talked about the deep shaking, the deep emotion that he felt along with many others. But then he also spoke of his huge pride in the efforts of firefighters who have spent hours tackling this blaze, who are still there at the scene trying to contain this fire. It does seem to have weakened a lot tonight. We've seen firefighters on the towers of Notre-Dame with flashlights looking to see how bad the damage is. We've seen those jets of water being directed over the flames, which seem to have abated somewhat. So the situation is looking more positive tonight. It does seem as if the fire has been contained. Some of the artworks we are hearing have been rescued. I have heard one report saying that a very famous Catholic relic, the Crown of Thorns, has been rescued. And we heard from the Mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, who was very quick to arrive at the scene, saying that some of those artworks had been rescued and were now safely in storage. And even though she is from the Socialists and President Macron is from République En Marche, he praised her today, saying that she had responded very quickly. He himself went to the scene very quickly himself. He spoke to police chiefs for hours. He was supposed to address the nation tonight to talk about the yellow vest crisis, but that has now been put to one side. That's been forgotten, really, as France comes to term with what's being described as a national tragedy, because this cathedral is, as you say, iconic. It's beloved by the French. Even if you haven't been to the cathedral, it's just part of popular culture. It was immortalised by Victor Hugo in his novel The Hunchback of Notre-Dame. It has survived the French Revolution when it was ransacked in the 1790s. It survived the Huguenots trying to pillage it as well. It survived the Nazi occupation. And yet, in a few hours, we have seen large parts of this building tonight destroyed. But at the end of the evening, it seems that there is now going to be this concerted effort to rebuild it. President Macron has talked about an international fundraising effort. President Obama, former US President Obama, has tweeted talking about how he's thinking of the people of France in their time of grief, but that it's also in the nature of people to rebuild for tomorrow. And we're hearing more and more sentiments like this. We heard from the Archbishop of Paris praising the firefighters when he appeared alongside Emmanuel Macron, and also calling on the priests in Paris to toll the bells of their church. So everyone coming together to show their solidarity, to show their support. We've heard from world leaders like the British Prime Minister Theresa May, Angela Merkel of Germany, expressing their solidarity with the people of France, and a special message to the Catholics of France, because this is a deeply Catholic nation, from President Macron, saying that the world stood with them, that France stood with them, and that in this special week for Catholics, this is coming up to Easter, a time of prayer when Catholics turn up to churches, go to cathedrals like Notre-Dame to remember Jesus Christ and to take part in services. To have a tragedy like this, it's something that is going to be even more deeply felt among the Catholic community at a time like this. And we've heard from the Vatican also talking about the sorrow and shock it feels. So really a coming together of emotion. And one thing I should stress, it seems from the Paris prosecutors that they don't think there's arson involved here or terrorist motive. Their initial investigation, which they've launched, seems to indicate some kind of accident that has occurred. We know that renovation work has been going on in this cathedral, so that's the line of inquiry that's being pursued. But it has been, as you say, a night of high drama and emotion.
That's right, and we'll be following also that investigation as they try and piece together what actually happened tonight and why that fire started. And as Jeanette was saying, there's been a real sense of solidarity around the world, but not only from world leaders, from people around the world who've watched it in horror as they've seen this monument that's much loved being engulfed in flames. Maybe now also a sense of relief as they hear that the structure might be saved. Well, Alex and the Cube team have been monitoring this.
Isabel, a jogger jogging along the banks of the Seine, a man on his way back from work, tourists. So these are just some of the people that we in the Cube, my team here in the Cube, throughout the night have been speaking to, sharing their stories. Some of the first people to see this deeply disturbing sight. And let me bring you a snap map. This is a tool Snapchat this social network uses to locate people's videos geographically. And when we're talking about Paris and Notre-Dame, this is Ile de la Cité. It is right in the heart of Paris. And when we zoom in, we can see some of the first videos, some of the first pictures that emerged were from ordinary people just picking up their phones and filming what they saw, like the tragic moment that the spire collapsed, that 19th century spire collapsing in on the roof. You can see, crowds of thousands reportedly gathering on the banks, plumes of smoke, all of these images captured by ordinary people, some saying with captions like, "Oh my God, what is happening? What is happening to Notre-Dame?" You can see various different angles. But then as the evening wore on, we started to see people gathering, groups gathering. Indeed, some groups here kneeling. We can see them kneeling. We know the religious groups kneeling, singing, praying. People watching on, as Isabel was saying, in horror, hoping that this blaze could be brought under control right in the heart, the cultural heart, certainly, of Paris. Well, let's just bring you up another feature that when the fire was raging, it is obviously still burning at this stage, it's not out yet, but when it was really raging, people reminiscing about their first time at Notre-Dame Cathedral, reminiscing about what it meant to them. And there was one image that really jumped out at me because it was an image from somebody who in the past had climbed to the top of one of these bell towers. And just have a look at what we're talking. Look at these timbers. These are the very timbers that we know, the wooden spire that completely collapsed, the 19th century one. This kind of thing is a nightmare for emergency services. And this is why this blaze was so difficult to control, this historic wood that made up so much of the structure. Well, Sam Tam, recalling climbing up one of these bell towers in the past, the many steps it took, but then ending the tweet with saying, "I am heartbroken. This magnificent cathedral is in flames." Well, the one good news about the bell towers is they were saved by the heroic efforts of the fire service. We saw pictures live from the top with firefighters with torches having climbed those towers. Really extraordinary stuff. Then we've got people reminiscing about this. Look at the beauty of the stained glass. This is a Gothic cathedral, yes, but so much over the centuries has been accumulated there. It's survived revolutions, it's survived plagues, it's survived occupation by Nazi Germany, and tonight's fire, many people feeling this was a real loss, but so much has been saved, and people paying tribute to the beauty, Isabel, of this cathedral. And you can get a real sense that it matters to so many, for so many reasons.
Yes, it's an event that's touched people's hearts around the world. Well, Alex and the Cube team, thanks so much. Well, we have our correspondent in Paris, Annalise Bourges. Now, she has been following tonight's events. Annalise, now you have been there in Paris. You've been speaking to people as they've been watching Notre-Dame Cathedral burn, but now a sense of hope.
Indeed, the French president came out to announce the good news. The two towers and the facade of the Notre-Dame have been saved. There were fears that the entire structure of the building had been compromised by these violent fires that are still raging right now. 400 firefighters were involved in trying to put the flames out this evening. And now, of course, the good news that indeed the structure, at least of the building, has been saved, and the French president vowing to rebuild the Notre-Dame. The sense in the streets of Paris today is that of an immense loss. This is not only a religious place, this is a monument, a symbol of the city, but also of the entire country. One of the most visited spots in France. 13 million people come here every year. There were many tears that were shed in the streets of Paris today, strangers hugging each other, saying that they could not believe this could happen. Indeed, it was unimaginable up until this morning that something of this magnitude could happen to the Notre-Dame Cathedral. And of course, this evening we saw history going up in flames. There is a sense still that this is part of the history of France, and that it will be rebuilt, and that the symbol and everything that Notre Dame represents will live on.
We seem to have lost their Annalise just at the very end of that, but Annalise Bourges bringing us up to date with those events in Paris as she witnessed them also for herself. Now, the fire at the Notre-Dame Cathedral has reverberated around the world, not least obviously at the Vatican, and our correspondent Georgia Alandi brought us the reaction of the Vatican as it learnt of the devastation that had been wrought to the cathedral.
Well, just after a couple of hours after the Paris Notre-Dame caught on fire, the Vatican released an official statement through Alessandro Gisotti, who's the main person really representing the Holy See Press Office. He wrote on his Twitter account saying that shock and sadness really are the two key words representing the Vatican reaction to this tragedy. He also said that the Vatican is very close to the French Christian community, and he also said that the Vatican is praying for those firefighters who have been attending the scene, trying really to extinguish that fire. We haven't heard from the Pope yet. He hasn't written anything, as he usually does on his Twitter account. We are confident that he will be speaking in the next hours. Although, Isabel, this is a very crucial week ahead of the Holy Week, and Paris Notre-Dame is famous as inside there are a couple of items that are really relevant to the Holy Week. One is a fragment that is believed to be a part of the cross on which Jesus was crucified, and the other one is a nail that the Romans used to crucify Jesus. But of course, here in Italy, this is a major news. We've been hearing as well from several politicians who have been expressing, of course, their sadness to this news. And one of these is Prime Minister Conte, and the other one is Matteo Salvini, the Deputy Prime Minister. Conte said that today is a day of sadness and a day of mourning, Isabel.
And it will take days to find out the full extent of the damage to Notre-Dame Cathedral. Well, Evelyn Laverick has been following tonight's events, and she walks us through the moments since the fire took hold of the cathedral.
Flames have torn through the heart of one of Paris's most iconic landmarks. The medieval Gothic Notre-Dame Cathedral became a burning mass on the French capital skyline as hundreds looked on in horror.
Yeah, we were inside and they take us outside, and then they said some people can go in to see the niece, and then they took everybody out, and then where the fire starts.
I saw it all when it all happened. I was drawing the cathedral next to the river. It was at 1953 when I took a photo and put it on my Instagram. And when I looked up, I saw smoke, very, very fast, and I understood that was what it was.